I am writing to you from a faraway place, from a city that is not Lviv, in a strange state of intoxicated euphoria that comes after sleepless nights and exhaustion. There shall be no letters, only this voice reciting words, not an easy thing to do. What is closeness? I look up the word in the Cambridge dictionary. The first definition, the quality of knowing someone very well, liking them a lot and wanting to spend a lot of time together. The second definition, the quality of weather or air conditions in which it is difficult to breathe and it is uncomfortably warm. I'm surprised. There's nothing about physical distance in these definitions. I look once again. Now I understand that there is a big paragraph I missed in which related words are described. I look at them. Float around, immediately, near at hand, under the same roof, within shouting distance, within striking distance, within spitting distance. Face to face, eyeball to eyeball, back to back, a stone's throw, a hair's breadth, anywhere near. The title Far from Lviv is stolen from the 1967 almanac by Godard and Marquer. Loin du Vietnam was about the inability to act, but at the same time the impossibility of ceasing to watch. I tried to find words that could sound the same in Ukrainian. I remember the one, vidalik. The word echoes and I contemplate the two parts it consists of. There is the distance in the word, dal, dali, and yet there is vid, away, apart. So what does it say? Away from the distance, apart from the distance. It obscures its own meaning and by doing so becomes comforting, soothing. It is hopeful in its unclearness. I'm talking about Lviv and yet I'm living in the other city, Vidalik. Not a stone's throw away, not within spitting distance. The other city is bigger and it exists in another time. It has a whole other rhythm. It is said to be the best city in the world, or the best city of Europe, or the best city within flying distance from Lviv. It is said to be the city of youth, city of carelessness, experiences, city where dreams come true, or the city where you can disappear. It started with a longing to disappear, getting off the radar, becoming untraceable, becoming forgotten. There were no reasons, only this constant urge to leave behind everything, burn the bridges, abandon the things learned, the work done, abandon friends, abandon everyone. The other city seemed like the place made for it, and so I did it. By now 10 years are over. Over the years I came up with the definitions of the other city. No crisis or catharsis happened. When measured against the backdrop of experience, expectations in the other city, I did rather little. Compared to others, I performed rather poorly. You always compare. You always have this image of what it should look like. This image is a collage of other images you have seen somewhere else. You memorized them, and so they became your own images. When you say you live in the other city, those are the images the people see in their heads. The common expectation of certain experiences makes this city communicatable to others, even when the images don't match with the reality. I left Lviv because the images that were being produced did not match with the images of my own reality. Lviv should become a city with clean history, packaged for easy consumption. It should become a place where new strategies could be tested. When thinking about the last years, I think mostly about one thing, distraction. The inability to concentrate on one thing. It's a common knowledge by now. Attention economy, the word that describes it all and yet describes nothing. The same as fake news, truth, singularity. Distraction is all about the inability to stop. Stop refreshing that mailbox. Stop scrolling the Facebook. Distraction is all about waiting for something to happen and knowing it won't happen. Because in this state nothing ever happens. Distraction is nothing else but sedation, painkilling in the most harmless way, without all the edge or danger. We argue that distraction ruins our ability to write diaries or letters. I hardly remember what I was doing in 2011, and I'm amazed when I uncover some notes I took that year. Everything between 2011 and now is erased. It sometimes comes back in form of Facebook reminders, random posts or photo albums. Mostly I don't dare to looking at them. At that time, photography did have a greater meaning. A walk through the city was a communication. The streets spoke with you, they gave you signs. Photography was only about recording this conversation. It was always a visible result, but the meaning of these conversations was always somewhere else. Urban decay, suppressed memories, remains of Soviet Empire, modernist architecture, everything had its meaning back then and was more important than the daily life. There was a secret and a promise behind all this. Lviv was a city of a forgotten utopia that could not come back, except for me. Back then no one cared for all this stuff. Suddenly it is in fashion now. Nostalgia is crowned as subversive and is in every hip sign or makes its rounds on conferences. I have the feeling that this thing that was the very essence of my emotional life, my only support, is being taken away, is being dismantled. First they take the city, but then they take the very idea of a city. Suddenly utopia is a contested territory, something that has to be deconstructed, repurposed or forgotten. 2008, I started to collect texts that were increasingly being produced by the city council experts. The message was simple: Lviv had to become a tourist city, and yet I had the sense that there was a bigger plan behind the development. The city should not only become a territory desirable for property developers, it should become a territory where emotions could be produced as goods, and at some point become the only goods to be produced in this city. For the cultural managers, anything could be developed according to plans. Traditions were seen as technologies that could be refined and reproduced in suitable environments. Local quirkiness should be melted with international strategies, and so progress would enter the city. There was nothing new about it. It was already carried out in other cities of the world. And yet I had the feeling I have to defend the space of my memories. This space was about to shrink to make place for the new. I have seen cultural managers as my enemies, and I have sworn to never participate in anything associated with the city council. In a way, I was explaining my own exile to myself. Suddenly it had a reason. Suddenly the absence made sense. At first I tried to phrase my anger using the left's vocabulary and grammar. We were dealing with neoliberalism in a country where the people would like to remain invisible to the state. The static side of the Lvivian emotional surfaces would cover the instability and temporarity of the economical reality, and because of that it should be opposed and uncovered. It was more dangerous than the brutal capitalist realism of the rest of Ukraine, where exploitation and injustice lay bare and were accepted by many as a transitional status quo. The Lvivian neoliberalism was smart, sexy, and made by young people on behalf of older people holding the power. At some point both things melted into each other. For me, youth became synonym of neoliberalism and change. Only later did I understand that it was rather not the political agenda that was moving me, but the fear of disappearance of places that made me myself. How should I describe these places? They were accidental, transitory, liminal. They were formed by history. They were the containers of time. You could say they were dilapidated, abandoned. Their surfaces were raw, broken. They had gaps. These places were dysfunctional, empty, waiting for resurrection, not reconstruction, waiting for the return of history. For me, Lviv was always a city with the promise of an utopia, and its enigma was the uncertainty of the nature of this utopia. The utopia to come would most certainly not restore old times, but rather the sensibilities that were to be found in the old times. And as such it was a space of messianic potentiality, a time that would not come but would change the way we perceive the space of now. For the lack of a better word, I should describe these places as the streets. The streets were accessible to all and were mundane enough to become invisible. Their mystery opens up only when you get involved, when you walk them, when you get lost in these streets. For years I walked through all the neighborhoods of Lviv to find places where the sudden state of sedated euphoria hits you suddenly and for no reason. It can be a certain street corner, a crumbling wall, a path in the woods. Anything can provoke a state of longing for the utopia that will not arrive. In the Portuguese language, these states are described by the word saudade. The word captures all the edges of this state, the feeling of an end, the sense of passing time, the infinite and the spatial. The past is desired as something that should occur in the future, but never will. The feeling circles around an absence, around something that never was, but has triggered a memory and a sense. This impossible constellation induces an almost physical sensation of pain and pleasure. It is clearly a longing to return, but there is no place one can return to. And there probably never was. Portuguese nation is said to be founded on this word. Saudade was not only about the distance in space, but also about memories as physical spaces. During the walks through Lviv, I had started taking pictures. At first they were simple notes to myself. At some point they became a way of communication with friends. The street had its own way of talking to you when you are listening. All these pictures were about me, but were also signs sent by unknown people, sent by the history of the space. They were commenting my life and my thoughts, and they were my life and they occupied my thoughts. I collected thousands and thousands of pictures of things I have seen on the streets. I used to post them online to avoid writing messages, letters, poems or diaries. They were me more than I was myself. For certain, they were saying more than I ever managed to put in words. These pictures were about the fragility of the visible, about the failures of communication and interactions, about the strangeness of the everyday. They could probably be described as street photography or anthropological studies, but their nature was more metaphysical. In a way, they were riddles for the future to come. Any piece of art is a message with an unknown recipient. Like this letter I am writing now, the reasons why I am doing it are still not really clear to me. In my mind I have a certain addressee in mind, and yet I am doing it for the public. The letter gets heavy, loses its thread. If there should be one reason why I am doing this now, then let's be it. Everything disappears, only the traces remain. If we are able to leave traces, we should do it, even if they are as fragile as films, or letters, or words. 2014 I saw the beginning of war from the safe distance of the other city. It was a war that was being streamed onto our laptops, into our beds. Everything was confusing, absurd, very real. The images were sharp or blurry, depending on the distance from the event. It seemed like everyone has started to film, as if everyone discovered the world for the very first time. Suddenly documentary cinema did not make sense. It was too distant, too slow, too clear, to deal with things that became visible. For days I was struck in front of the screen, watching, archiving, trembling. I have no notes left from the year 2014, only videos saved to YouTube playlists. Upon opening this playlist in 2018, I discovered that 2/3 of the videos are gone. The channels were deleted, the users blocked. Our digital existence is fragile and fleeting. Did you know that there is no way to back up your Facebook conversations? Exactly as there is no way to search for something in them. When you keep on talking long enough in the Facebook Messenger, your words will begin to disappear into a digital distance, into which you can scroll but which does not really interest you. The digital is always ready, always there, and as such leaves no traces in your memory. The digital is all about the immediate gratification. Pleasure spikes the moment after receiving a new message, like, or only updating the page. It is never about waiting, turning off, thinking through. Years of loneliness have turned me into someone who can only refresh pages but is not able to read books. Ukraine made it easy. For years now, exciting news can appear any minute, and Facebook is immersed into collective auto-anthropology. It is better than any series, so it should be observed. You can't miss something. It is as if you are watching a giant puzzle being assembled, and in the end everything will suddenly have a meaning. They say from the distance you see everything sharper, you see the bigger picture. I don't agree. I'd say from the distance you only see yourself, or rather yourself looking at the picture. Guilt is not the right word. One should rather use some other word. For example, lack. Ukrainian reality is vast, brutal, and immediate. There are lots of it, so it is a subject to poaching. This is how I created my film. I recorded endless hours of walkie-talkie conversations of anonymous people, and I squeezed out a small history of a big revolution. This was my way of dealing with the passivity in face of historical events. The film made me famous to some degree, and I hope that it will say more in 10 years' time than it is saying now. Yet I could not get active, get involved in things. No cause was good enough, no goal reachable. Safe support from afar seemed like the only plausible action. One's own life should not be invested into this. One should become a spectator, an archivist. And this was what I was doing. For a couple of years I was collecting videos of the war in the eastern Ukraine. At some point I had the sense I have seen everything. Every possible camera, every possible angle, all the situations. War has its own vocabulary, and I was an avid pupil. There was a feeling that one can make a film about this war from the distance without ever being there. Everything was already seen by other eyes and other cameras. If anything, what is this war about? It is about bringing the images and with it the fear into places distant from the action. And so should the film about war look like. It should not explain, but rather show how we see and why we are made to look. I spent months on cutting that film. Those were the days when I was doing nothing else but listening to the sound of distant shellings, echoes, barking dogs. This war was all about acoustics. Few could see the devastation, but a lot of people could hear the event, the war happening. It was like war was everywhere and nowhere. At the moment of the shelling it had its epicenter. but the waves of sound, rolling, evolving, spread the sensation of war to distant places. It was as if I could find the definitive sound of war, a signature echo, a video that would explain it all. It was a hunt after this one video. At the end, it was clear that nothing can explain the state we are in now. In the end, I have cut a 5 hours film from the material. Even such a long film was nothing but a compilation of preliminary notes, a sketch awaiting further development. I have perceived it as a film made by myself for me, a mnemonic tool for remembering what Ukraine was in the second half of the last decade. As my walkie-talkie film was all about remembering the Lvivian Ukrainian language, the war film was about remembering the way the sound of the shelling was expanding in the distance before dying away. I wanted to be able to remember things I have never experienced in the first place. In a way, my memory of the last 10 years spent in the other city was not worth the archiving. Instead, the memory of Ukrainian reality, as seen by countless anonymous others, was more important and should be saved from the oblivion. I am not sure this can be called patriotism. I am not sure if I can call myself a historian or an anthropologist. These projects are more about me than they are about the events. They are more about my way of dealing with the events I should have participated in. They are always about the distant gaze, distant in time, space, always looking backward. Last decade in Ukraine was a decade of masses. Individual decisions mattered, but it was more about the waves these decisions were producing, like the waves of a shelling thunder echoing in the distance. Masses was something unimaginable in the other city. They were gone, at home, not in the streets. Everyone was an individual, uncountable, unaccountable. Everyone had his own opinion, and this opinion was counted and presented in statistics. Everything went according to the plan, everything went smooth. The masses of Ukraine were different. They were unimaginable, unrepresentable. They were hidden, yet their force was everywhere. They would only come out on special occasions, only to disperse and disappear once again after everything was over. We were told that they were bad or not there. For a while now, I was interested only in these mass movements, the way you could catch this simultaneity of small actions, responses, evolving of positions. I was not interested in biographies, heroes, figures. I gave up on authors and I started to resent the documentary cinema, always about the story, about the character, always studying, explaining. I was after the cinema of masses. Unknown YouTube users have created the 5 hours war movie. They were the real authors, so I was reluctant about putting my name on the film. It was their film, it was their war. I did not want to bring the film on the festival circuit, making it comparable, making it a statement. I wanted it to remain in the form I have found most of these videos in, unwatched, unliked, in a distant corner of the internet. This was a continuation of my quest for the ultimate disappearance. Exchange your own gaze for the gaze of the others. Give up the privileges of a director. Stop making films. Start developing archives. My very first movie about the conflict of official language, of cultural managers, and the street-level reality of Lviv at the beginning of the decade became prophetical. Some things disappeared, leaving no trace. The absence was not tragic, it rather made the passing of time perceivable. These gaps punctured the straight line of time moving forward. This disappearance made us remember things we did not know about when they were there. In a way, the disappearance created them for us, made them desirable. Working on my own disappearance, I have not only chosen the other city, I have chosen another occupation. The work I was doing was demanding constant exhaustion. It promised a burnout and an ever-increasing lack of time. The people that were doing this job knew about it very well. Somehow it made us all brothers, or at least accomplices. I wanted to have a work that would drain me enough, so I would not have time or capacity to think. The wish came true. I switched my day-night routine. For years I was working nights and slept in the daytime. The work I was doing was not leaving any visible traces. It was as a Sisyphus work. Every night you would start anew, knowing it would never have an end, something to come back to. I have learned to battle sleep. I have learned to enjoy the sensations of sleep deprivation. On a summer night you could sit in an empty dark room overlooking the city and hear the humming rising and ebbing. You would hold back as long as you could, and then around 4 o'clock in the morning, when the senses were slowly leaving you, through the haze of this euphoria, you could sense for a brief moment that this city belonged to you. You were the only person awake in the whole city. You were the container of all the thoughts and the dreams. There was no anxiety and no despair, only the flow of time and street lights. Occasionally I had days off, so I used the nights on walking the city. The images you see now were shot on a couple of summer nights. With no aim, I was traversing the city from west to east, from north to south. Night has always this comforting feeling. If you would stay up long enough, you would feel a certain sense of forgiveness cast upon you by the darkness of backyards and side streets. In the dark, I was not only far from Lviv, I was far from everything, far from myself. I had a feeling of connection to the other people's lives, a feeling of participation. A lit window, a TV flickering, anything could become a story, anything was lacking context, beginning or end. By walking at night you were cutting the scenes, loosely connecting the ends. Most of all, it did not last. There was no way of knowing if these stories were true. No archive could be created out of this. The night was not an object, but rather a state dissolving mundane objects into their specters. Like the VHS I was using for my recordings, the night was manipulating the visual surface of things, unearthing their meaning rather than their definition. Night has no purpose. It is a pause, a hiatus, a gap, a state and a place where directions are not important, and as such, the nearest I can get to Lviv. Lviv was always the place of waiting, waiting to leave, waiting to get to the places where life is happening. Anything could trigger this yearning for other places. Mostly it was music. I used to listen to London pirate stations during the advent of dubstep music. The music was nothing like you heard before, but it was mostly the distance to the places where it was all happening that fascinated me. Croydon, Hackney, Roman Road. Listening at night to low bitrate live streams, I was imagining a topography so very much different to the one I knew in Lviv. It was a place to invest one's hopes in, even knowing that one would never get there. It is 2020 and I have never been to UK. It is still this immaculate territory of dreams and fantasies. Dubstep is dead by now and London redeveloped. Yet I still tremble when I hear these charts and subs. If something These moments are not triggers of memories, but rather vessels containing the states more important than memories. Those were the times when experiences could be made from fantasies, because they were so strong, so lasting. The distance did not weaken them, it rather made the experiences stronger, deeper. They were imprinted into your brain with the fiery force of desire and impossibility, and so they lasted the longest. Thinking back about all this, I start to think about stuff that matters to me. Night, clouds, sunsets, echoes, memory, lviv. Again and again, nothing of it is of any substance. Everything dissolves easily. Nothing is material. It is an optical or an acoustical illusion. Especially Lviv. There is no such city on a map. The one I come back to so often is remembered, imagined, reimagined. For years I used to come back to the city streets by closing my eyes and having walks. I used to look at every detail. I used to do this for hours. It was more intense than actually walking the city streets. I wonder if something like this happens to the displaced people driven out of Crimea or Eastern Ukraine. My position is privileged. I can return any time, and yet I am not doing it. Perhaps it is this in-betweenness I need, neither here nor there, always leaving, never arriving, always in transit, always waiting, expecting, counting the days, till departure. At first, the concept of never accepting to develop roots seems to be romantic. Yet if you are choosing to abandon roots by your own will, you have most likely the choice between going and staying, and as such you are nothing else but a confused modern human. Romantic, in its initial sense, was all about tragedy, loss, death. It was about ruins, remains. It was about the color blue, color of distance. To be called romantic, something has to be on its last legs, on the brink of vanishing. This is something that can be found all over Ukraine. Yet is not to be found in the other city. As a resident of the other city, I am not entitled to this word. Life in the other city is seen as a kind of sport. You can get trained if you try hard enough. It is also seen as a game where rules can be learned. Sometimes they talk about it as a kind of illness that needs individual therapy. Everything is negotiable. Everything needs to be talked through. Your failures are celebrated as your resources. They double your potential human capital. Anything can get turned into worth. First you work on it, then you invest it. You get your shares, and then you profit, only to start anew. This is called development. Sometimes it's called life. In the other city, your dysfunctional life is a gimmick, a trait, an asset. It is cherished as an achievement, something that has to be refined, but also measured, catalogized, archived. You should thread the fine line between therapy and sickness, never fully recovering, keeping the malaise as your main resource. You should be moving forward, expanding. The other city was conceived as a refugium for people who have felt an irresistible urge to leave. Most of these people have had places to come back to, and eventually they did. Coming to the other city was not a victory, and leaving it was never a loss. The other city could never be homeland because it was always a destination created in dreams. As such, it is different for everyone and always temporary. It is not a place to settle, because you can't make your own imagination your place of residence. You can haunt it sometimes, but cut it short. Dreams are not a place for permanent vacation. Over the years, one had often had a sense of an imminent apocalypse in Ukraine. The news kept coming in, and you knew it was about to get worse. There was a certain perverse fascination to it. What if everything would really end at some point? What if we would be able to see during our lifetimes? What if that would be the ultimate experience of the real, a feeling to end all feelings? Over the years, we have learned to live with the feeling of constant alertness, and yet sometimes it has felt like a feverish insomnia or a sleeping sickness. I wonder if there are any lessons to be learned from this. Distance is a somewhat misleading concept. In a world where there is no longer point A or point B, where there can be no trajectories, distance is somewhat outdated. What if we learn more from our lives, from the sound of the shelling near Hrashevate, than from the walking the streets of the other city? Who is it to tell us this is a bad life decision? Spread between the street, the internet, the dreams and the memories, the modern life is not like anything we have read about in books as kids. What if clouds are more valuable experiences than sex? What if the 90s are not really over and will never be? What if the ever-approaching apocalypse is not a dreaded end, but rather a promise that keeps us going on and on? In this new world of chances and shifting instabilities, only the ability to keep uncharted terrain matters. The moment we will be chased out of our lands, stripped of our possessions, and questions about our identities, we will withdraw to these environs. And what if these are just words, and everything will be different in a reality where a gun is pointed at you, your passport cancelled, and your body expelled over the real or imaginary border? No matter how deep are the walls, we say, these possibilities remain when you are born in the dreamland Ukraine. Perhaps these are the images we run away from, but which still make us ourselves. I don't know if anything of this has any meaning. I said too much, and I still said not the things I wanted to say. It just feels weird, and I probably have to stop. See you, or see you don't. Моє місце посеред точкової забудови, конверсій, зміни цільового призначення, посеред термінового виготовлення закордонних паспортів, поговоримо по скайпу, посеред пообідньої тиші 31.12 і так кожен день заберіть собаку, посеред неперетравленої трави, вічного застою в очікуванні минулого, посеред ненанесеного на мапу, товста чи повздовжна лінія, пунктир продовженої тимчасовості, посеред просторів, які виявляються ділянками, багаторічними стосами паперів, посеред станцій швидкої допомоги, кип'яток і заварка, шум ламп, злили бензин, посеред чемоданів чужих фотографій, скільки дасте, забирайте й так, все, посеред порожнечі радянської архітектурної фотографії, колись вони дивились Антоніоні, гуляли у Роксі, писали звіти, посеред автобусів на медику, не та зміна, нічого не змінюється, не все вдається, посеред полегшеного перетину, єдиного вікна, БТІ, посеред переговорів диспетчерів, металевих хрестів з пластмасовими квітами, пішов і не повернувся, посеред пересадок і зустрічей, наскільки, після Нового року, посеред поколінь Андріїв, А92, А2014, АС2, витратні матеріали, що робити з надіями, посеред кудою і чого, судомних спроб довести власну пільговість, посеред підзамча, бо твоє є царство, посеред накопичення і збуту, гуртівень і можливостей, пункт крові, посеред зрізати, посеред через колію, посеред дірки в паркані, посеред повідомлень для своїх, Володя, я коха, чорне молоко світання, ми, посеред охоронців, нудьгуючих вахтовим методом, 1/2, 45/55, посеред вогнової підготовки, ящик патронів за ящик горілки, скинулися, повитирати пиль і спалити карти, посеред вулиць генерала і апостола, посеред зимової широкої луни і кровотеч, прямо там на столі, не вивезли, посеред будинків середмістя і панельок Сихова, виключити світло і слухати, чим далі, тим більше, себе, тінітус. Посеред темної німої території, калій і сірка, є ще на що подивитися, порожні вагони йдуть на схід. Посеред радянського кіно, коли камера вихоплює розфокусованих перехожих у невідомому місті. Посеред бажання втекти і розмовляти англійською, сповідатися і діяти. Посеред дачних кооперативів і маршруток, посеред сполучення. Посеред точок, де прощай має всі ті свої значення, так і не намалювали, а могли. Посеред нікому не надо і навіщо ми. Посеред повільності і невпевненості, коли то було. Посеред порохів бібліотек, взяти додому і не читати, довго не повертати, дивитися у вікно. Посеред дистанцій колії, повертаючись через Персенківку, пальці у фарбі, схоже на Лондон. Зависати і переписуватися, зубоскалити, боятися, кожне слово брати у лапки, отримувати синхронність. Посеред добратися і виїхати, спочатку з Сихова, потім з країни. Посеред далі вже нічого немає, а куди вам треба. Сихова теж не було, кілька місяців поспіль. Ображатися і вичікувати. Посеред днів без фотоапарата, дивися і запам'ятовуй. Посеред всіх тих ємностей на кухнях. Посеред заведених тонованих машин, світло в цехах. Посеред дітей і собак, облізлої штукатурки, добудованих балконів. Посеред котів і мінералів, дослідників і вернакулярних районів. Посеред гуртожитків і їх білявої цегли. Посеред розселення, тимчасових церков і самовільних хрестів. Моя віна, моя bardzo wielka віна. Посеред дріжджів, шкіри, мастил. Посеред днів, коли треба йти на південь, бо там топить сонце, зима, в небі гудуть ракети. Посеред знелюднення і істерик, гістеректомія. Ілля, бо для того, щоб було, тебе не потрібно. Навіть пророк не обов'язковий. Старий год закінчується совсем неплохо. На підзамчі лягає сонячна імла. Ту еграс. Ми все ще вдаємо, що можемо жити де-інде.